What is up, investment family? My name is Forrest. I invest in stuff, and today we're going to talk about Palantir. I have a pretty unique perspective on this, and that I have worked as a software engineer consulting on government projects, which is really why Palantir has gained so much traction, or really what everybody's so excited about is really this promise, or really their ability to work with the government and secure these contracts in a way that nobody else has. And I think this is important because these insights help me when we talk about what Palantir's value prop is and their ability to merge data, aggregate this data and visualize it in new and meaningful ways across disparate data sets. I actually understand the effort and what that looks like. So there's two primary points that I want to make. One is, why does Palantir actually have a unique and promising and powerful position in the market? And two, really why this isn't as magical or as unique as people might think it is. So first, let's circle back to who is Palantir, who are they as a company, and what are their products. So at a high level, Palantir is an organization that creates tools to ingest disparate data sets, visualize them. They work with people like the US military, racing teams. All of this is on their website, and I want you to take a look at their website to get a better idea, really in their own words, of what these different products are. So here we go back into iPad land. So here we are, we're now looking at Palantir, and we're just gonna go straight to their different products. So let's look at Palantir Gotham first, right? So I actually have experience working with Gotham. Now I can't go into the specifics of this because when I did that, it was all while I had my secret clearance, and I don't know what falls into what bucket, but I can, based off of what is publicly shown here, definitely talk about it. Not too concerned about the secret stuff, by the way. Just not going to deal with it, so I don't have to really think about it. But it really honestly doesn't matter, right? You'll honestly get a pretty clear understanding of what this software does just with this, right? So let's just read it. It says, organizations have data, lots of it. Structured data like log files, spreadsheets, and tables. Unstructured data like emails, documents, images, and videos. This data is typically stored in disconnected systems where it rapidly diversifies in type, increases in volume, and becomes more difficult to use every day. So that's cool. But let's look at what Gotham actually is. So taking a look at their platform features section, we have this graph, map, object explorer, and the browser, right? So when we talk about like the human interface and really where all the value is extracted out of Palantir and their products, that's what Gotham is. I would actually reckon to say that Gotham really is the product, and all of these other things that we're going to talk about next are just components of that that really make up the capability or the feature set that is Gotham. But let's move on to the next one, Palantir Foundry. So again, just reading here, it says Palantir Foundry is a platform that reimagines how people use data by removing the barriers between back-end data management and front-end data analysis. Foundry enables users with varying technical ability and deep subject matter expertise to work meaningfully with data. With Foundry, anyone can source, connect, and transform data into any shape they desire, then use it to take action, right? So under the hood, it says they have versioning semantics to keep data and business logic in sync, branching of code, analysis and reports, microservice architecture, open APIs, a bunch of stuff that I'll dig into here in a second. But just to have a full, really just overview or understanding what this is, we'll look at the last product here, which is Palantir Apollo. Right, it says power SaaS in places no SaaS has gone before. So if you're not familiar with SaaS is, that's just software as a service. All that really means is that instead of owning the code for the tools and deploying it and running it yourself, someone else does that, and then you log in to their tool. And so you're using their software as a service, you pay a monthly fee, contracts are usually done annually, in multi-year contracts like that to access, you get a license for this software. So let's just read this really quickly. Our platforms are often deployed to users in environments where other SaaS could never operate, from the back of a Humvee to the hull of a submarine. Palantir Apollo is a continuous delivery software that powers our SaaS platforms, Foundry and Gotham, in the public cloud and beyond. Apollo works around the clock to put our latest features in the hands of customers and eliminates the trade-off between stability and speed by delivering continuous, automated updates without disrupting operations. It's why our platforms power mission-critical operations for the world's most important institutions. Cool. Really, the last important feature here is the like and subscribe button. So go ahead and click those really quick if you appreciate where this video is going, and if you want to see some more. I appreciate each and every one of you. I definitely do not discount the time that you're spending here. So please slam that. Love y'all. Thanks. Let's keep it moving. So next I want to give, my thoughts on Gotham, or really what this is. And I'll talk about my experience with it. So Gotham really is the interface. Again, it is that visualization layer that allows us as end users to realize, right, all of this analysis and aggregation of data that's coming in from these different modules, from all of our disparate data sets, right? So that's really where the value is. When we talk about Palantir and their platform, the best I understand it today, and it's been a few years since I've used it, but that is really where all the value is realized. That is the product as far as the end user is concerned, right? Which is pretty important, right? There's all this AI and stuff that they talk about, but the ability for users to use that and interact with it in a meaningful way is where all of that value ultimately is derived. Another important component here is that this is run in a web browser, right? As far as I understand, there might be a custom, for some of these other platforms like the Humvee, which was mentioned in the article, right? There might be something there, some other specific kind of front end, but I'm pretty sure this is all web browser, which is an important note. We don't need to get into the super technical side of it, but when you're doing complex computations and all this just in a web browser, there are limitations there. You can't just do everything in web browser, especially on a slim machine or something like a laptop, that's probably in a deployed out in the field somewhere, right? You don't have all that computing power, so you still need those capabilities, but you need it in something that as lightweight as a browser. So that's moving on to my thoughts on Foundry. Again, Foundry is that data ingestion layer. I think here this is also pretty important, right? So Gotham is where the value is realized. I would say that Foundry is kind of where the value is born in the first place. It's also where all the complexity lies. Well, not all of it, much of the complexity lies. It's also where, and I'm going to talk about it in a second, where their differentiation and also their possibility to get undifferentiated lies, right? When you create modules, and what they're doing isn't that new or crazy, by the way. You have different APIs and things and a microservice architecture that allows you to ingest data from different areas, and then there's some transformation processes to standardize it in some way or to connect these things in whatever type of graph that they're using. You have a massive web or set of services that you now have to maintain. The other problem that you might have is if I have different versions of things, right, which I don't know if they have, but if they have different versions of their SaaS to maintain across different customer sets, this becomes entirely more complicated, and the amount of different types of data that you ingest can also limit your continued velocity going forward. So there's a ton of complexity here, and I would honestly could shoot a 2-hour video just kind of mapping out why this is so complicated. But what you need to understand is, their value is really limited to their ability to keep up with what their value prop has been so far, which is their ability to ingest disparate data sets, which is just really hard. There's no AI or anything that can do this for you. The best data sets are curated data sets, right? So you basically taken some data and you basically said, we're going to make sure that it looks like this because we know that we want to process it like that. And when you don't do that, things become computationally harder and slower, right? And the more and more different disparate data sets that you have, the harder it gets, right? It compounds. So it's cool to be able to just overlay and bring in different types of data, right? And maybe it's especially unstructured data, which they do a lot of, but there are limitations to that, especially as you bring in more and more different types of unstructured data, which I know sounds weird because it's not structured, but you have different structures of unstructured data. Mix in with structured data, and it just goes on and on. But that's Foundry. Then we talk about Apollo. Apollo is their continuous delivery mechanism. This is not a product. I mean, if we talk about like a SaaS solution, right, you have to be able to deliver updates. Everybody who has a SaaS solution needs to have a mechanism by which the users can get the latest version. The fact that it's deployed or running on a Humvee somewhere really isn't that big of a deal. It's just however you got the software in the first place. that's how you're gonna get the updates. If it's running in a browser and you have an internet connection, then you're literally just always logging into the latest version. If there's a client or some kind of thin client that you're running locally, then you just download the latest client. According to them, they're doing continuous delivery, which means it's probably a web browser, and these updates are happening automatically, which is really cool and simple, and it's one of the primary benefits using web browser is you're just always using whatever version is out there, and if there's a different version, you can literally just go to that using a URL or something like that in most cases. So this is really just like fancy marketing. Apollo is not a product. Cool, so let's talk about the not magic part, right? So when I started this video, I said, I want to talk about why they have a unique value proposition, and I also talk about why this isn't as magical or crazy as definitely the people in Wall Street Bets and everybody else who's investing in Palantir think that this is. Software is not magical. I've worked and built a number of different types of software, some more complicated than others. I understand the different aspects or different domains within this software pretty well. Am I an expert on all of them? Certainly not, right? I'm not going to feign expertise, but what I do understand very well is how all of this works together, and I do have a certain amount of expertise across these different domains. So again, the important thing here is in government, when you're working on these contracts, one of the hardest things about this isn't the technical aspects of it. It's really the bureaucratic aspects and the people, right? The government moves very slow. There are a ton of systems are isolated from each other. It's not easy. The hardest part about getting data from A to B in the government space isn't the data type or anything like that. It's usually that it's a 6-month process. For whatever reason, these processes are often very outdated. They're doing them just to do them, and nobody really cares to change that for the most part. It's really hard to come in and immediately create value in these government organizations because they're not designed to do that, right? They very much move slow on purpose. It's really painful, which is why government spending is so wasteful, but I want to go down that road. Why this isn't magical, again, all of these different data sets, you're talking about writing tons of custom software, tons of custom modules to deal with processes, and then there's the technical component. These processes are bespoke to the different entities that they're being written for, right? So you have government entity A, government entity B, you have different governments, right? So the way that they're ingesting data for the US government is going to be different from the way that they're ingesting data for countries over in Europe. You're going to have so many different custom ingestion paths, and there's no magic way to do this. The only way to do this is to have a specific team of engineers go and solve and create software for those specific problems to get that data in there, right? So that's the non-sexy, magical or non-magical part about it, which is also their primary value prop, right? So the reason why Palantir can be so successful is that they've navigated this space, they've created these relationships, maybe they've created just enough change to get this done faster than anybody else, and the end product, Gotham, is being used by key stakeholders in the government, in the military, out in the field, to manage, operations, do things like that for really, active ops and things like that, right? So when something comes a key component to a mission, right? If Palantir's tooling and their workflows can become mission critical, now you're talking about something that's really, really hard to displace, right? If you think about somebody who's out and they're in charge of other people's lives, they're in charge of doing X, Y, and Z, and they have a tool set that they like, that they're used to, it's going to be really, really hard, even if you have something that is definitely better, to come in and say, hey, you need to go through the effort to change all of this when they've got a mission that they've got to do tomorrow, right? Then tomorrow comes and they got a mission that they got to do the next day. So switching costs is very, very, very high. It's not easy, and a lot of that is due to process more than anything else. But because this process is slow, it's going to be really hard, even if someone comes up with a better tool, to displace Palantir, because it's just going to be so taxing on these entities to do that. right? So there is that upside there. Now, the flip side of that is that obviously anybody in a competitive situation that is using that better tooling, if they go through the effort, they win. That's how competition works. But the real world and very likely scenario is that due to the complexity of even just navigating this space and working with these entities and how slow they are, it's whoever's there first and has been building those relationships and has those contracts signed is going to own that space for a long time. And these government contracts can be very big, and they can be for very long. Big and long sounded weird, but you know what I mean. They can last for a long time. So again, Palantir doesn't only do government contracts. They have a commercial side, but really these contracts are why everybody has their eye on them. So focus this on that. The commercial space is much more competitive, honestly, right? So it's going to be much more easy to displace their specific tool set, especially with my experience using it. It's really cool stuff. They have like 3D maps that you can overlay. You can overlay data sets, and you can like navigate a city in real time and maybe like scope out threats, do things like that. But all of that could just be like, anyone else could build that. Literally anyone else could build that. The value is in overlaying disparate data on top of these models, visualizing it, and using it in different ways. Being able to do that with, secret data sets, top secret data sets, and dealing with that data and securing it, and in a way that appeases these entities, even if it's honestly not that hard or difficult in the first place. It's just the fact that they're like, they've got the people in there saying the right things, doing the things, right? That's where the value is. So the commercial space, I just don't think what they're doing is that crazy. Anybody can compete against Palantir in the commercial side. In my opinion, again, all of this is my opinion. So last and definitely not least, let's take a look at their financials really quick. So I'll go ahead and jump into Morningstar, Palantir Technologies. And we're gonna go straight to their financials. We're not gonna read anything. This is not gonna be an in-depth analysis. Really just wanna take a look at their income relative to their recent price movement, right? So at the most recent quarter, Q3 2020, looks like they've done $0.29 billion, which is $290 million for anybody who's not good at math. Total revenue, right? Total gross profit of $0.14 billion, which is $140 million. This is down over their Q2, but Q2 was actually a blowout quarter. So if you look at Q3 2020 compared to Q4 2019 and Q3 2019, this is pretty much on par. So growth is up on average, but if we plotted this on a graph, we'd see a spike and then back down to kind of this level that they were at before. Feel free to dig into this. Again, not an ad, but Morningstar, great tool to just quickly glance at financials. So what does it cause of the price run up? And should, in my opinion, is this something you should invest in? I'm not invested in Palantir. I think that there's definitely upside there in the long term. I think you might get beat up a little bit on near-term price movements, as with anything that becomes hyped up and popular. So if you get in tomorrow, you might lose in the next week or the next month. But if we talk about long term, which is, in my opinion, the best way to invest, I think there is some significant upside there. And so if you're willing to deal with losing a little bit in the near term, and you just want to get in because there can be the prudent thing to do, which is just invest and believe in your hypothesis and hold for 5 years. If you look 5 years out, you're going to reap a ton of gains. You're not going to remember the volatility of this week at all, and maybe by then it won't be as hyped up, especially when we look at the fact that they're possibly working with multiple governments and things like that. Again, not my recommendation or anything, not saying you should invest, do your own research, but if I were going to invest, I certainly would not be too concerned with near-term volatility unless I was looking to trade on it, in which case I'd be very concerned and making sure that I was very abreast of upcoming news events and things like that. So that is Palantir. Really wanted to shoot this because I've seen everybody's been talking about it, so I did some research, wanted to get my thoughts on it. I'd worked with the product before in the past, and so I was actually kind of surprised at, honestly, just the amount of hype around it based off of me using the thing and seeing how it works and knowing very, very, very well exactly how software is developed in the government, because I've done it and I've worked with people and different entities, all of that. So yeah, definitely, again, cool stuff. Not as magical as people say it is. Their value is really in their execution or their ability to work with these disparate entities. So that is it for this one. If for some reason, like a madman, you did not hit the subscribe button earlier, go ahead and press it. Help me get to 10,000 subscribers. You could be the next one. But until next time, Forrest, I invest in stuff, and I am out.